Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is information@cuandreview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 15th of January 2025, from the Voices section. Scotland Hotels Group benefits from often overlooked thing. This article is by Ian McConnell. Too often in the business world, especially these days, short-termism is the order of the day. This should perhaps be no great surprise. Executive remuneration tends to be driven by short-term targets. And management consultants and the like, of course, make more money with every company restructuring in which they have a hand. It is a world in which short attention spans, lack of patience, and a failure to understand the value that can be created with a long-term approach are all too prevalent. Against this backdrop, it was heartening to hear the head of a Scottish hotels group last week highlight the importance of having long-serving employees. He observed that the workforce includes hotel general managers with great experience who know their individual businesses within the group inside out. Chris Wayne-Wills, Chief Executive of Herald Hotel Group, highlighted the crucial role played by long-serving employees in the context of the significant advances in turnover and gross profit reported in the company's recently filed accounts. He also hailed the fruits of major investment. Herald Hotel Group, which was acquired in spring 2023 by a joint venture between Blantyre Capital and operating partner Fairtree Hotel Investments, achieved a rise in turnover to £20.19 million in the period from March the 26th, 2023 to March the 31st, 2024, from £18.56 million in the prior 12 months. In an exclusive interview with the Herald, Mr. Wayne-Wills underlined the importance of the long service of the group's hotel managers. He said some of the general managers are now 15 years or 20 years of service. It is a real case of people really knowing what they are doing with their businesses. And he pointed to the stability of the senior executive team, observing he had been at the helm for nearly 5 years, while also flagging the long service of other staff. Mr. Wayne-Wills highlighted the fact the executive team had all been together for a number of years, and he said that at a recent celebration of long service, there had been around 110 staff with 539 years of service between them, as he underlined Herald Hotels Group drive to be an employer of choice in the areas in which it operates. Celebration of long service is not something that people would always necessarily associate with a business with a private equity owner. That makes Herald Hotel Group's continuing recognition of the importance of having long-serving staff all the more heartening. And there is no doubt that attaching value to long service makes sense generally, of course, and specifically in the context of Herald's efforts to realize the full potential of its portfolio. These are hotels which have positioned themselves towards the top end of the market, with excellent service crucial. Key to this is to have experienced staff with all levels of the business. Herald Hotel Group has taken major steps to make itself an employer of choice through salary and benefit packages and training opportunities, and this is not mere lip service. And such positioning is crucial when it comes to attracting and retaining talent against a backdrop of severe skills and labour shortages in the sector, which have exacerbated by Brexit. Mr. Wayne Wills, in the interview, also highlighted Crerair Hotel Group's focus on quality food ingredients, which are often locally sourced, highlighting customers' focus on provenance. Quite simply, if you are asking customers to pay for quality, you must deliver it, and Crerair Hotel Group's results indicate that it is doing just that. The group has also taken on the management of 3 landmark hotels owned by the joint venture between Blantyre Capital and Fairtree. These include 2 hotels in Perthshire, which are Dunkeld House Hotel and Fonab Castle in Pitlochry. The other hotel, which came under Crerair Hotel Group's management in summer 2023, is the Daffodil Hotel and Spa at Grasmere in the Lake District. Mr. Wayne Wills noted the management arrangement for these 3 hotels meant that the total number of staff in the group had more than doubled to 750. Around 325 staff are employed in the 7 properties under Crerair Hotel Group's direct ownership. The group has taken major strides in offering in-house training for key roles, with its chief executive noting the increased scale made it easier to provide its own apprenticeship schemes. Mr. Wayne Wills highlighted the fact that Crerair Hotel Group had set up its own culinary and future hotelier apprentice schemes. It also offers apprenticeships for spa therapists. A long-term approach has been plain to see throughout Crerair Hotel Group's business for years, with its bounce back from the grim effects of the coronavirus pandemic, aided in large measure by the benefits from heavy investment in its properties. Mr. Wayne Wills flagged a strong performance by the Balmoral Arms at Ballater on Deeside, which has undergone a major investment. The hotel was formerly known as the Deeside Inn. The other 6 hotels owned directly are Lochfine Hotel and Spa at Inverary, Oban Bay, Isle of Mull Hotel and Spa at Craignure, Gulf View Hotel and Spa in Nairn, Thainstone House in Inverurie, and Glencoe Inn. Mr. Wayne Wills flagged the benefits of major investments in spa facilities at the Inverary and Nairn hotels, and the part this wellness-type tourism is offering had played in boosting winter demand. And he highlighted plans for further investment in the portfolio, as well as the potential to take on more management contracts. There is no doubt that the Scottish hospitality sector is facing challenges, and Mr. Wayne Wills made no bones about these. He said, "I know in talking to some people across the industry it is challenging." Crerair Hotel Group looks to be performing very well indeed against this difficult backdrop. Mr. Wayne Wills said the group had achieved further rises in occupancy, room rates, and food sales in its current financial year, which will end in March. In these difficult times, it is important to celebrate the success of Scottish businesses. In the case of Crerair Hotel Group, there is cause for particular enthusiasm on this front, given it is reaping the rewards of a long-term approach and valuing its most important assets, its people. That article was by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 15th of January 2025, from the business section. Celebrity chef Nick Nairn in bitter restaurant dispute. This article is by Scott Wright. A bitter cash row between a prominent Scottish hospitality couple and their landlord led to the closure of their high-profile Bridge of Allen restaurant, the Herald can reveal. Celebrity chef Nick and Julia Nairn handed back the keys to Nairns on the town's Henderson Street to Douglas Wood last year, after the business was hit by what the couple described as a perfect storm of events. The Nairns argue that a management contract agreed with Mr. Wood to operate the former Jam Jar restaurant in 2019 had become onerous, following the huge changes which swept across the hospitality sector with the pandemic and subsequent cost of living crisis. The restaurant, which had been rebranded as Nick's on Henderson Street in February 2020, was also struck by a fire in August 2021. It did not reopen until July 2023, when it was relaunched as Nairns. The couple claim attempts to renegotiate the deal with Mr. Wood were rejected. However, Mr. Wood flatly rejects the claim that the management contract had become onerous, declaring that many hospitality operators had been able to adapt to the changing trading conditions. He said the failure of the restaurant has left him around £100,000 out of pocket. A winding-up order was granted by Stirling Sheriff Court for N&N Realisations, the company which traded the restaurant, in October, following a petition from Mr. Wood, owner of local wine merchant Wood Winters. Mr. Wood petitioned the court to wind up the company as he sought to secure outstanding rent owed to him under the terms of the 10-year management contract he agreed with the Nairns in 2019. Under the deal, the Nairns agreed to pay a percentage of turnover to leaseholder Mr. Wood every quarter. However, the Nairns argue that the management contract with Mr. Wood had become unviable because trading conditions had changed so much. Speaking to the Herald, Mrs. Nairn, the sole director and shareholder of N&N Realisations, said the restaurant suffered from being closed for so long and declared the world had changed by the time it had reopened. She noted that the cost of living crisis was in full swing by then and that competitor food businesses had been established in the town. Mrs. Nairn said, "When we finally reopened on July 31st in 2023, we reopened with very little buffer. We had very little to fall back on. The cost of living crisis had kicked in, and we opened with the wrong offer. We did a small plates offer in Bridge of Allen, but it turned out nobody wants small plates on a Wednesday afternoon in Bridge of Allen. Saturday night was great, but Wednesday lunchtime was not. But we also came back in year 5 of our contract with our management agreement, which meant Mr. Wood was now entitled to 4% of the turnover. So we have a 2-year closure, and from the very beginning of this contract, the percentage went up incrementally to allow affordability and growth. We came back after 2 years of closure in year 5 at the maximum point of percentage. That is the thing that kind of killed us. And there was no negotiating of the agreement. Mr. Nairn, one of Scotland's best-known culinary figures, thanks in part to a media profile built up over several decades, said that repeated requests, either directly or through the landlord, to sit down and renegotiate this management agreement were rejected by Mr. Wood. He said, "We had repeatedly said we will need to reset this agreement to reflect what has happened with COVID, what has happened with the cost of living crisis, because all of these things have made the original management agreement null and void. It just simply doesn't work. But at no point was there any give." However, Mr. Wood dismisses claims he had rebuffed the Nairns' offer to renegotiate and denied that the management contract had become onerous. Mr. Wood told the Herald, "The way customers now eat out has changed. Good operators know this and changed the offering to something that was more accessible, which recognized that they, the consumers, would go to a few times a month rather than something more high-end that was for special occasions. The management contract offered amazing value for someone to come in to a fully fitted restaurant with virtually no upfront costs, unheard of in our industry. Mr. Wood added that he had pursued the winding up order because of non-payment of both wine bills and management agreement, declaring that the Nairns had consistently broken payment terms. He said that after COVID hit, he had offered to split the management fee during periods the restaurant was closed. That sum still hasn't been paid, and you can imagine how far that goes back, he said. Mr. Wood noted that the Bridge of Allen restaurant collapsed, owning him around £100,000. However, Mr. Nairn said, "The one figure you could take in terms of what Doug is owed is the figure that he put in for the wine he supplied, which is £45,000. That £45,000 has now grown to £110,000. We are not even sure where it has all come from. The only substantiated figure we have is that £45,000. Official documents obtained by the Herald show that N&N Realisations is being wound up by court liquidation. A statement of affairs for N&N Realisations, formerly Nairn & Nairn Limited, prepared by joint interim liquidators Scott Milne and Brian Milne of Quantuma Advisory, reveals a shortfall to creditors of more than £300,000, the amount by which liabilities exceed assets. Joint interim liquidator Brian Milne states in the report that no preferential claim has been received from creditors. However, he does anticipate receiving preferential claims from the Insolvency Service for any payments they make to the company's former employees in respect of sums due to them following the termination of their employment. Based on the information currently available to me, I would anticipate a dividend being payable on the preferential creditors, he said. Mr. Milne goes on to state that a secondary preferential claim is anticipated from HM Revenue and Customs, which is owed around $220,000 in respect of VAT, and PAYE, pay-as-you-earn arrears. He also anticipates a dividend being payable to secondary preferential creditors. However, Mr. Milne declared in the report that he does not anticipate a dividend being paid to unsecured creditors. At the time of the report, unsecured claims of £128,685.86 had been received by the interim liquidators, and further unsecured claims are anticipated. It is also anticipated that the arrears owed to HM Revenue and Customs may also include an unsecured element, the report states. Based on the information currently available to me, I would not anticipate a dividend being paid to unsecured creditors. The report shows the firm's creditors include Wood Global Limited, Mr. Wood's company, which was owed £109,260, a range of food and drink suppliers, and the Royal Bank of Scotland, which, according to the report, was due £30,000. The report also highlights that, following a review of the company's books and records, a sum of £159,938.91 is due to the company from the director and associated companies described by the Nairns as intercompany transfers. While the joint interim liquidators have written to all parties concerned requesting proposals for repayment, the director has disputed the sums due, and the liquidators, once appointed, will require to continue to pursue recovery of these sums. Mrs. Nairn said the creditors' report was a snapshot taken in August, and that there are suppliers who were paid a long time ago. She said good relationships have been maintained with suppliers which were continuing to work with the Nairns with regard to their business at the Port of Menteith. Referring to the intercompany debt, Mrs. Nairn told the Herald, "That was the number that was taken at the time liquidators were appointed. We have worked with the accountant and the administrator, the liquidator. That number has been reduced some, and there is a plan to pay back what is owed. There will be money going into that pot from us personally." That article was by Scott Wright.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 16th of January. From the news section. BP to cut 4,700 jobs as 30 projects halted since last summer. Article by Brian Donnelly. A major oil and gas player to axe thousands of jobs and is focusing resources on the highest value opportunities amid a raft of halted ventures. BP has said it will cut 4,700 jobs across the global workforce and 3,000 contractor roles after it stopped or paused 30 projects since 2024. The company did not disclose how many people were affected per country, but the reductions amount to just over 5% of its 90,000 worldwide employees. BP has about 14,000 UK workers. Around 6,000 of those are based in petrol and service stations and will not be affected by the cuts. Chief Executive Murray Auchincloss announced the redundancies in an email to staff. He wrote, "I understand and recognise the uncertainty this brings for everyone whose job may be at risk, and also the effect it can have on colleagues and teams. We have a range of support available, and please continue to show care for each other, be considerate, and keep putting safety first, especially during times of change." BP said the cuts were part of a multi-year plan to make savings across the business, and that there may be more reductions this year and beyond. Mr. Auchincloss added that the job losses account for the much-anticipated reduction this year. He said the company is focusing on resources on our highest value opportunities and that it has stopped or paused 30 projects since June 2024. The reductions come as London-based energy giant tries to bring more digital capabilities into the business, with artificial intelligence increasingly playing a role in engineering and marketing operations. Mr. Auchincloss's memo said about 2,600 of the contractors involved in the job cuts have already left the business. He continued that the company is uniquely positioned to grow value through the energy transition, but that doesn't give us an automatic right to win. We have to keep improving our competitiveness and moving at a pace of our customers and society. In October, its worst quarterly profits in almost 4 years, the 30% decline during the 3 months from July to the end of September was expected as demand for oil has slowed amid other global economic activity, particularly in China. Underlying replacement cost profit, BP's preferred measure of $2.3 billion, equivalent to around £1.77 billion, was in fact slightly better than the $2.1 billion anticipated by analysis. The results were still BP's weakest since the fourth quarter of 2020, when the industry was hit by the COVID pandemic. The group reported a net profit of $2.8 billion in the second quarter of this year and $3.3 billion in the third quarter of last year. Shares in BP were up by 1% in afternoon trading. And that article was written by Brian Donnelly and read by me, Aaron. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 16th of January, from the news section. Glasgow brand launches Jacket for Jacket scheme to battle homelessness. Article by Mark McDougall. A fashion brand based in Glasgow has teamed up with Homeless Project Scotland in a bid to help people experiencing homelessness. Finiston Clothing will be running a Jacket for Jacket campaign, which encourages customers to bring in their old jackets when purchasing a new one. In return, the old one will be donated to Homeless Project Scotland, and customers will receive 20% off all apparel for the brand's Byers Road and Shawland stores until the end of January. Figures from Shelter Scotland say a household becomes homeless every 16 minutes across the country, and Ross Geeds, the founder of Finiston Clothing, wants to do something to help. He's devised a plan and is hopeful it can make people's lives better. He said, "Winter is an especially difficult time for those without stable housing. Walking around the streets near our shops on Polshocks Road and Byers Road, it's to see that homelessness is a growing issue that we as a community need to do something about. Anyone can fall in a hard time, and we urgently need to come together to help. This is just one small step." We encourage people to shop sustainably and think about the lifestyle of clothing. The Jacket for Jacket campaign is one small way our customers to make a difference and extend the usefulness of a product. Homeless Project Scotland, a charity run entirely by volunteers, focused on providing essential items and support for the homeless community, will ensure that donated jackets will reach those who need them most. Colin McInnes, CEO of Homeless Project Scotland, said, "It's extremely disheartening in this day and age that businesses are having to step in and help people who should be supported by our government, both at local and national level. We thank Ross and the team for helping us raise awareness of the dire situation that many people are facing. I would like to thank members of the public for their support and the businesses like Finniston who continue to try and step in and fill the gap left by the powers that be." Finniston Clothing have had other initiatives as it tries to make people think differently about the way they buy. They recently launched a new line of premium wool outerwear, which is insulated with the wool of Gede's own grandfather's sheep. And that article was written by Mark McDougall and read by me, Aaron.
The Herald, Friday the 17th of January, from the news section. An exclusive article, Family to Sell Long-Standing Hotel in Scottish Seaside Resort, by Brian Donnelly. A long-established hotel described as a gem in a Scottish seaside town has been brought to the market. The hotel is a stone's throw from the beach and bustling town centre, the agents said. The Arundel Hotel, a long-standing establishment in Ayer's hospitality landscape, has been a preferred accommodation choice for visitors to the region, said CCL Property. Its strategic location provides convenient access to Ayer's coastal attractions, historic landmarks and the bustling town centre. The family-run hotel, which dates from the 1830s, has a reception room and a spacious dining room that accommodates 20 covers, and is completed with a lounge fitted with a bar, fireplace and seating. The gem in the heart of Ayr is also fitted with a commercial kitchen and utility area. The agent also said, the property features 10 well-appointed rooms, including 9 en-suite and 1 single room with a private bathroom, all individually decorated to ensure a unique and comfortable stay for guests. The hotel has retained many of the original features, which includes ornate cornicing, maintaining the traditional charm of the property. Purchasing this hotel is an amazing opportunity. It currently operates on a bed and breakfast basis, but does offer significant potential for expansion. Previously, the hotel hosted regular functions and its bar and restaurant were open for non-residents serving lunch and dinner. The property also holds an alcohol licence and is in a prime location near local amenities. The agent said new owners could consider reopening the restaurant for regular service, expand events and functions offerings, and potentially develop partnership with local attractions to create package deals for tourists. The Arundel Hotel is marketed at £825,000. The Herald, Friday the 17th of January, from the news section. Ferries fiasco. Fergus Marine paid ship delivery director £144,000 by Jodie Harrison. Increases in payments made to a senior manager seconded to the government-owned Fergus Marine shipyard were absolutely stark, the Auditor-General has said. Andy Crossan, who has since retired, was a senior figure at ferry procurement body Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited, or CMAL, but was seconded to Ferguson Marine after the then Chief Executive, David Tideman, said he was looking to bolster his team. Ship Delivery Director Mr Crossan was put on the payroll at Ferguson's with a salary of £36,000, which was eventually up to £54,000. But through a company for which he was the sole director, Mr Crossan invoiced the yard for £144,000, on which Ferguson's had to fork out £48,000 in unpaid tax. Appearing before the Public Audit Committee at Holyrood on Thursday, Auditor-General Stephen Boyle was asked about the increase in payments, which he described as exponential. He told MSPs there was an increased volume of time commitments and expectation that the secondee from CMAL was providing to Fergus Marine Port Glasgow. But it's absolutely stark. the growth, and there's concern that those circumstances were allowed to materialise without proper checks, balances and controls. Mr. Tideman was sacked by the Yard, which is responsible for the building of 2 massively late and over-budget ferries last year, with the Auditor-General telling MSPs processes are now in place to ensure such a situation cannot happen again. In the same session on Thursday, Mr. Boyle said 21 people had been given exit packages from the Yard in the 2023-24 financial year, totalling up to £440,000. The majority of those, he said, were payments in lieu of serving a notice period, while 10 were due to ill health. According to Audit Scotland Director John Boyd, 7 members of staff left the Yard with the financial settlement the year before, the Auditor-General said. The Glen Sannox, the first of the 2 late ferries, entered service this week, while the Glen Rosa is due to be delivered in September. The Herald, Friday the 17th of January, from the news section. FM pushed on bowel cancer after revelations in the Herald by Kathleen Nutt. John Swinney is being pushed to extend the bowel cancer screening age to people under 50 after the Herald reported on a major surge in cases of the disease in younger people. Mr. Swinney heard the plea at First Minister's Questions on Thursday from Scottish Conservative MSP Edward Mountain, who is a survivor of bowel cancer. Last weekend, Mr. Mountain urged Scottish ministers to extend the programme to save lives and NHS resources. If the disease is caught early through screening, it is easier to treat and requires less complex medical procedures than if it is identified at a later stage when it may have spread to other organs. A report published in November last year by Public Health Scotland found that the risk of all cancer in women and girls under 50 has increased by 6.5% since 2012, while remaining constant among men. But cases of bowel or colorectal cancer have jumped by 30% in both males and females under 50. Screening is offered in Scotland and Wales for people aged 50 to 74, while in Northern Ireland screening starts at 60. The UK government announced last week it would be extending bowel cancer screening from 50 to 54. In light of the rise in the number of people under 50 being diagnosed with bowel cancer, what proposals the Scottish Government has to extend the national bowel screening programme to those under 50 years, Mr. Mountain asked. Mr. Swinney thanked Mr. Mountain for raising this important issue and for the commendable commitment and leadership that he has shown on the issue inside and outside Parliament. However, he added the Scottish Government follows advice from the Independent Expert Advisory Group, the UK's National Screening Committee, which recommends bowel cancer screening for everyone between 50 and 74 every 2 years. The recommendation was based on a thorough assessment of the risks and benefits of screening people at different ages. I assured Parliament if the National Screening Committee recommended a lower rate change, we would explore, as a matter of urgency, how that could be taken forward in Scotland, Mr. Swinney told Holyrood. Mr. Mountain said while extending screening may not be the most cost-effective approach to combat the disease, GPs needed to be made more aware of its symptoms. He also called for greater access to colonoscopies, which can detect cancer tumours at an early stage, sometimes following a home screening test. I have been told that there is a lack of capacity in colonoscopies, he said. The result is that it ignores the real costs of bowel cancer treatment, which could include radiotherapy, chemotherapy and surgery, all of which have a huge cost. Mr. Mountain urged the Scottish Government to carry out its cost-benefit analysis to assess the savings which can be made from increasing colonoscopy capacity. Mr. Swinney said, I will consider all the points that Mr. Mountain has put to me about the bowel screening programme and will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care to advise me on those points. It is important that we take all practical steps to act in accordance with the clinical advice that is available to us. Bowel cancer is the third most common cancer in Scotland, behind lung and breast cancers, with 4,000 Scots diagnosed every year. It is treatable and curable, especially if diagnosed early. Many patients with bowel cancer have no symptoms in the early stages of the disease. However, symptoms can include rectal bleeding, stools that are black and tarry, severe fatigue, low blood count and anemia. The Herald, Monday the 13th of January, from the news section. UK's first safer drugs consumption room opening in Glasgow by Paul Cargill. The UK's first safer drugs consumption room opens its doors in Glasgow on Monday. The Thistle Centre will provide a space where drug users can take illegal substances such as heroin and cocaine under medical supervision in a clean and hygienic environment. The Scottish Government hopes those who attend the pilot facility can be encouraged to seek support to overcome their addiction. Staff will also be able to assist anyone who suffers an overdose. Scotland continues to have the worst rate of drug deaths in Europe, with the latest figures showing 1,172 people died from drug misuse in 2023, a rise of 12% on the previous year. With Glasgow, one of the worst affected areas, groups in the city have campaigned for years for a safe consumption facility to be established. The centre was finally established after Scotland's top prosecutor, Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain KC, made clear prosecuting users of such a facility for possession of drugs would not be in the public interest. From Monday, the centre in Hunter Street in the East End will open to users from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 365 days a year. The centre will be supported with £2 million of Scottish Government cash each year. Speaking during a tour of the facility last week, First Minister John Swinney said, "I hope it will help us to reduce drug deaths in Scotland and to help people to find a different route in their lives. We will evaluate the effectiveness of this particular intervention to determine the progress is achieved, as a consequence of it, what impact it has had, and to learn the lessons from it." Health Secretary Neil Gray said, "I hope this will be another tool in our box in reducing the harm and reducing the level of drug-related deaths that we see in Scotland, and that the pilot will be successful. Critically, I want this to be a facility that is well used. I want there to be confidence in the community about coming here." Organisers supporting drug users have welcomed the facility. Ronnie Hart from Paisley used substances for more than 30 years before going into residential rehabilitation. He is now a recovery worker with drug and alcohol charity With You. He said, "I was able to visit the Thistle last week, and I was very impressed by the work that has gone into creating a warm and welcoming environment. It is a really nice service that will draw people in who would otherwise be using in lanes and car parks, giving them access to medical interventions and showing them that they are valued members of our society. People who use drugs in a harmful way often have very chaotic lives. Even if they want to make a change, they don't know where to start. The Thistle will be a really important tool for reaching people in Glasgow who really do need support and sharing advice on how to be as safe and healthy as possible. For me, that's a no-brainer." Graham Callender, policy lead at With You, added, "Often a person will attend a With You service because, for example, they want to collect fresh injecting equipment. They will be absolutely resolute that they don't want any other help, but over time relationships begin to form with our support workers. Soon that person might ask about other treatment options or recovery groups. The Safer Consumption Facility can work in the same way, as well as enabling people who use drugs to do so under the supervision of trained medical staff. It will provide a unique and vitally important opportunity for specialists to build relationships with people who can really benefit from support. That engagement will be pivotal to the overall impact of the Thistle."
From the Herald, Saturday the 18th of January, from the news section. Analysis. Final analysis. What do I take from 16 years in journalism? By Helen McCardle, health correspondent. I read somewhere recently that a generation is sometimes defined as 16 years. That seemed opposite to me as, after nearly 16 and a half years, I am bowing out of journalism to venture into career pastures new. I am lucky it ever lasted so long. My first job, as a trainee reporter with the Sunday Herald, was on a 12-month contract, but a company-wide staff reorganisation announced just a few weeks into my post put me in the fortuitous position of being the cheapest person in the building. I am pretty sure that is the only reason I ended up as a permanent reporter at the Herald, covering general news, as I spent that first year feeling out of my depth and certain I'd be found out at any moment. A lot has changed in those 16 years. When I joined the Sunday Herald in September 2008, there was optimism that the United States was on the verge of electing Barack Obama its first black president. Barely anyone had heard of Twitter. I didn't join until 2011, and neither the Herald nor the Sunday Herald had a website. This weekend, we're on the cusp of a second Donald Trump era with X, formerly Twitter, owner Elon Musk acting like a de facto president, using social media to fuel culture wars and rail against the fake news mainstream media. It has been a tumultuous time to work in journalism. My own career, as a general reporter, then transport correspondent, and since November 2016, health correspondent, has spanned the credit crunch, 2 referendums, Scottish independence and Brexit, and 5 UK general elections. I was transport correspondent when the Clutha helicopter crash shocked Glasgow in 2013, and health correspondent when COVID broke out. But I have also been fortunate to use my annual leave for travel reviews that have taken me to Hong Kong, Orlando, Toronto, Italy, Belgium, a winery in Uruguay, and even the CERN Nuclear Research Centre in Switzerland. The job still has its perks. When Emirates brought their A380 Super Jumbo to Glasgow for the first time in 2014, I was among the lucky reporters to get a sneak peek on board. At the weirder end of the spectrum, I've also toured Trump's iconic private jet, shoes off of course, and the then business mogul landed at Prestwick in November 2014 to outline his grand plan of jetting high rollers into Scotland on his own private fleet for luxury golf holidays. Some stories stand out more than others, of course. I still vividly remember answering the phone on Good Friday in 2018 to a caller who wanted to know that the NHS Tayside, then under fire of its financial mismanagement, had, a few years earlier, pressured its board members to agree to transfer millions in charitable donations from its endowment fund into its day-to-day spending pot after running out of money already allocated to IT projects. We splashed the story 5 days later after corroborating the tip-off through several other sources and documentary evidence. It triggered an outcry that saw the chief executive step down and Scotland's charity regulator, OSCR, launch an investigation. There was also the NHS Highland bullying scandal, exposed by the Herald in September 2018, when existing contacts approached me to express frustration that their attempts to raise the issue internally were being stymied. When the Herald broke the story, with a letter signed by senior medics and a front-page story based on and off-record interviews with frontline staff, it prompted the Scottish Government to initiate the Sturrock Review and set in motion a process that would see more than £3 million paid out in compensation. Yet, it remains one of the most disheartening aspects of being a health correspondent that the same problems, whistleblowers victimised for trying to raise patient safety concerns, cronyism among senior managers and consultants, or departments depleted as staff flee from dysfunctional workplace cultures, still seem to bedevil the NHS throughout the UK, despite numerous exposés and inquiries. The stories that stick with me the most, however, are the really human ones. I still love the tale of brothers Jim and John Beckett, both retired engineers. Jim had been responsible for the electrical and instrumentation systems on the UK half of the Channel Tunnel, who drew up plans in 2016 for a £300 million Clyde monorail that they said could get passengers from Glasgow Airport to Glasgow Central in just 18 minutes. Like so many of the ordinary people I have been privileged to interview over the years, they were extraordinary in their warmth, enthusiasm and tenacity, but 9 years later we still await any form of real link. Then there was the retired pharmacologist, Dr. Richard Marshall, who phoned me out of the blue one day in July 2019. He had been on the bus when he saw another passenger using their blue inhaler, salbutamol, and wondered if I would like to know the story behind its development. Dr. Marshall, it transpired, had been the first person in the world to test the drug when he was a 22-year-old student and volunteered for a clinical trial run by fellow Scot Sir David Jack, in which he was accidentally given a near-fatal overdose. That was quite hairy, said Dr. Marshall with deadpan humour. These are the stories I find comforting when everything seems so depressingly polarised and people appear, as Naomi Klein puts it, to have lost the ability to imagine the perspective of others. Over Christmas, I watched the film Year of Living Dangerously for the first time in 20 years. In it, Billy Kwan, a war photographer in Sukarno's Indonesia, despairs at the sheer volume of human misery confronting them and invokes Tolstoy, asking, "What then must we do?" Sometimes, covering health, I have felt a similar pang. So many stories deserving of attention, but too many for one person to cope with, and does reporting it really make a difference anyway? Kwan's conclusion is to give with love to whoever God has placed in our path. In other words, do the little you can as best you can. I know I tried. And that article was written by Helen McCardle. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 18th of January 2025, from the news section, Glen Sannox hit by fault as services delayed in first week. Report by Mark McDougall. The Glen Sannox has been hit by delays caused by a fault in the vessel's bow door less than a week after its first voyage. The over-budget and long-delayed boat finally took to the waters with passengers on Monday, but CalMac reported a fault with the boat's bow door this morning. The issue has now been resolved, but sailings for the rest of the day are subject to delay, with the company's website saying services are liable to disruption or cancellation. The ferry operator's 8:40am sailing from Broderick to Troon was delayed by more than an hour, while the 10:50am sailing from Troon was also delayed in its journey, leaving the mainland at 11:25am instead. Sailings at 1pm and 5:20pm from Arran to and from Troon at 3:10pm and 7:30pm, with CalMac urging passengers to check in as usual. A CalMac spokesperson said, "This morning, the first sailing of MV Glen Sannox was delayed due to a blown fuse which affected the bow doors. This was quickly resolved and the vessel has been making up time, with her timetable expected to return to normal by the end of the day. This sort of technical issue is a routine occurrence on any vessel and is usually quickly dealt with by the crew, as it has been today. The vessel officially entered service on Monday, having originally been intended to come into service in 2018. And that report was by Mark McDougall. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 18th of January, from the politics section, exclusive, Swinney faces difficult tightrope with Donald Trump. Exclusive by Rebecca McCurdy, political correspondent. John Swinney faces a difficult tightrope in negotiating with Donald Trump over the next 4 years, experts have warned ahead of his inauguration. The incoming US President, who is sworn into office on Monday, has a complicated relationship with Scotland despite the affinity he holds for his heritage. His mother moved to the United States from the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, and Mr Trump is known for a string of business interests in Scotland, including his Aberdeenshire and Ayrshire golf courses. While a Times poll suggested support for Mr Trump was at 25% in Scotland, the highest anywhere in Western Europe, his relationship with the country is complicated. He has fallen out with every Scottish First Minister since 2007, and that relationship has not improved after John Swinney publicly endorsed Mr Trump's rival, Kamala Harris. Professor Chris Carman of the University of Glasgow warned Mr Swinney not to expect Trump's affinity for Scotland to hold the US administration back from imposing controversial taxes on whisky. John Swinney clearly has recognised there is not much benefit in antagonising Trump ahead of any discussions about US imposed tariffs, he said. The Scottish Government will likely have to navigate a difficult tightrope in dealing with Trump over the next 4 years. Mr Swinney has held productive calls with the incoming President and has said he plans to use Trump's affinity for Scotland to avoid potential tariffs being applied to US imports. During his presidential campaign, Trump pledged to impose a blanket 20% tariff on all imports into the US at an expected cost of £22 billion to the UK. However, the President-elect's son Eric described Mr Swinney's endorsement of Kamala Harris during the presidential election as nasty, while Trump International Scotland said the comments were an insult. Professor Murray Leith, an expert in US politics at the University of the West of Scotland, said Mr Swinney faces a challenging relationship with Trump, but said the pair will likely be publicly polite if they meet later this year. He has referred to Scotland in very disparaging terms in the past, he told the Herald. This is Donald Trump we're talking about. This is a man who sees the world in simple terms. What can you do for Donald Trump? Professor Leith also hinted that Trump may hold a grudge against Mr Swinney for his comments during the election last year. He said, Donald Trump holds a grudge against everybody. He's a very transactional individual. You either do for Donald Trump, you support Donald Trump, or you're against him. That's the way he views the world. I think it's going to be a very difficult and challenging relationship with him. Professor Leith also warned Swinney against believing the affinity the incoming president holds for Scotland will be enough to stop him imposing controversial tariffs. I don't think there's much affinity that he's going to hold close to his heart at the end of the day, he said. Edinburgh University's Dr Fraser McMillan, however, said the transactional nature of Mr Trump meant he may well be willing to drop the grudge if he was going to benefit. Trump is obviously a tough character to work out sometimes, but he is also very transactionally minded and makes a lot of difficult decisions based on gut feeling, he said. Although he has been known to hold grudges when it comes to international affairs, it comes back to how utterly transactional he is. All three political experts also suggested Mr Trump's relationship with Mr Swinney will be one to watch because of the President-elect's historic relations. His relationship with former First Minister Alex Salmond got off to a positive start. Mr Salmond intervened to help Mr Trump's Aberdeenshire golf course open. But in 2015, when neither were in power, the pair clashed, with the former SNP and Alba party leader calling Mr Trump a three-time loser who had caused damage to Scotland. Mr Trump fired back, arguing his one-time ally was simply a has-been, and referred to the former First Minister as Mad Alex over an offshore wind project row. His relationship with Mr Salmond's predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, never took off. She refused to meet Mr Trump during his first presidential term from 2017 to 2021. On a trip to Scotland, Mr Trump said of the then First Minister, "She has not been too helpful for Scotland, not a great person for Scotland." The sour relations continued, with Ms Sturgeon stripping Mr Trump of his business ambassador for Scotland status. And when he was ousted from the White House in 2021, she said in Holyrood, "I'm sure many of us across the chamber in Scotland will be happy to say cheerio to Donald Trump. Don't taste ye back" might be the perfect rejoinder. After she quit as First Minister and SNP leader in February 2023, Mr Trump made a dig. He said, "Good riddance to the failed woke extremist Nicola Sturgeon of Scotland." Prior to his time as First Minister, Humza Yousaf, then Justice Secretary, suggested the Home Office should deny Mr Trump entry after how he handled being defeated in the 2021 US election. But Professor Carman said Mr Swinney showing respect to the President-elect could help the rocky relationship. He said, "Yet, Trump has also been happy to embrace previous political adversaries, as long as they are willing to show him deference." The Scottish Greens have urged Mr Swinney not to meet or hold productive discussions with Mr Trump. However, Mr Swinney has been clear working with the incoming president will be important to Scotland's trade interests. The party's co-leader, Lorna Slater, said she struggled to see how it could be in Scotland's interest to court favours with the president-elect. But Mr Swinney hit back at the former ministerial colleague, arguing he had a duty to promote and to protect the interests of Scotland. Mr Trump is expected to visit Scotland later this year to mark the opening of his new golf course at his Balmini resort. And that article was an exclusive by Rebecca McCurdy.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 20th of January 2025, from the Voices section. Transport Scotland defies physics with A9 dualling latest. Article written by Alan Simpson. According to the dictionary definition, accelerate means to begin to move more quickly, to move faster, or to gain speed. It's a fairly simple explanation, and we all know that the best way to make a car go faster is by putting your foot on the accelerator. Either that, or push it over a very steep cliff, but that's unlikely to do the bodywork much good. Runners are also credited with accelerating as they head down the back straight in pursuit of glory as they chase down the field ahead of them. Indeed, anything that can actually move can accelerate, as well as decelerate. However, the bright sparks at much maligned Quango Transport Scotland have rewritten the laws of physics by claiming that accelerating the dualling of the A9 will not save any time on the project. This, of course, does not make much sense, as accelerating anything will lead to more speed. It's basic physics, and you don't need to be Albert Einstein to work it out, or the reverse either. If you decelerate, then you go slower. But Transport Scotland have rejected plans to accelerate the dualling of the A9 over concerns it would not save any time on the project. Not that you can actually accelerate on the A9 anyway, given it is mainly single carriageway and there are a lot of camper vans, horse boxes and lorries to get in the way. Following a request from a committee of MSPs, Transport Scotland said efforts to speed up upgrades to the road risked affecting the revised end date of 2035. The body said it would investigate plans to bring forward improvements to the Dalnaspidal junction at Glengarry. Transport Secretary Fiona Hislop said the current timetable for the project was robust and practical. 2 sections of single carriageway on the A9, totalling about 11 miles, 18 kilometres, of road, have been upgraded over the past decade. About 77 miles, 124 kilometres, have still to be improved as part of the £3 billion project, which will extend from Inverness to Perth. Delays and rising costs have repeatedly hit the dualling upgrades, which were initially scheduled to be completed this year. Former Transport Secretary Mary McCallan announced a 10-year delay to the proposals in December 2023. The Citizen Participation and Public Petitions Committee presented a report to Transport Scotland in October, which called for the dualling of certain sections to be brought forward. But the body said reviewing the current timetable risked the certainty over the final cost, could cause further disruption to motorists, and put the project at further risk of delay. In its report, published last week, Transport Scotland said it had explored whether some sections should be speeded up on safety grounds or where lengthy diversions could be put in place should the road be closed. It said it had considered introducing overlapping construction on the carriageway to speed up the project. It also suggested rescheduling the planned programme of work around the areas of road deemed to be least safe. However, it said its findings revealed that current scheduling achieves an earlier overall completion date than would be achieved were it to be rescheduled. The report did acknowledge there may be scope for the Dalnaspidal junction section, which will involve extending the Glengarry dual carriageway north by about 0.6 miles, 1 kilometre, to be brought forward from its current completion date in 2025. The Tomatin to Moy stretch, which was scheduled to be finished by the end of 2027, has been pushed back to 2028. The total cost of upgrading that single carriageway section, which covers a distance of about 6 miles, 10 kilometres, is expected to run to £308 million, about £111 million more than previously estimated. Ms Hislop said real progress was already being made on the project. She added that a £5 million package of new short-term safety measures would be put in place by the end of March this year. I believe that the report demonstrates that the delivery plan is a robust and practical approach to undertaking this large programme of work in the years ahead, she said. We are already making real progress in delivering on the plan. But SNP MSP Fergus Ewing, who has campaigned for the dualling project, described the report's finding as deeply disappointing. He added, "This is deeply disappointing and a sham." It is hard to argue against Mr Ewing on this occasion, as the logic does defy belief. Dueling the road will cause major disruption during the construction phase, but delaying it for a few years won't make it any better when it eventually happens. Going with the Transport Scotland thinking, if you've got £20 on a horse in the Grand National and it jumps the last in the lead, don't scream at it to speed up. Instead, shout at it to stick to the agreed timetable, as accelerating past the other horses won't make the finish line come any quicker. It will also ease disruption to the other horses too. Of course, Transport Scotland has form when it comes to foul-ups, as it is ultimately in charge of the ferry network and the railways, and we know how they operate at times. Next time your train is late, be comforted by the fact the driver didn't accelerate, as their bosses don't believe that going faster makes any difference. Ferry building is also not a particularly strong point either, given the massive delays to the MV Glen Sannox and MV Glen Rosa being constructed at Ferguson Marine in Port Glasgow. But maybe the yard also came under instructions not to accelerate construction, as the delivery date wouldn't come any sooner if they did. Just when you thought Scotland's transport problems couldn't get any worse, defying physics is now on the table. That article was written by Alan Simpson and read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 20th of January 2025, from the Voices section. US is wrong to claim it has brokered peace in Middle East. Article written by Ros Foyer, STUC General Secretary. Last Friday, in Glasgow, our biggest teaching union, the EIS, launched an updated version of its Education for Peace policy. A response, no doubt, to the often chaotic and internationally war-torn world in which our young people are having to consider their futures and develop their attitudes and skills. The war in Ukraine, the carnage in Sudan, and of course the chaos and killing in the Middle East are most fundamentally a human tragedy causing death and suffering for hundreds of thousands of people. Our airwaves and social media spaces are filled with images of unspeakable crimes, ill-informed commentary and hate. As I write, there is the potential for a fragile peace in Gaza, leading to the end of Israeli killings in Gaza and the return of the hostages, horrifically held for 15 months now. I say potential because even in the short time between the writing of this column and it being read, things could change again. Even as the children danced and the men and women wept in the streets of Gaza, the bombs rained overhead. People continued to die through senseless acts of military violence, including an attack from Israel on a residential building. And I am writing of a conflict in which at almost every turn for 3 generations, the hopes of peace and justice have been crushed. The EIS Education for Peace policy recognises 3 overlapping ways to achieve peace: peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. The people of Palestine and much of the wider region have been the victims of the total and abject failure of the international community to achieve any one of these 3. Peacekeeping would have involved not giving carte blanche to the Israeli government to carry out the horrors witnessed in Gaza these past months, whilst giving billions upon billions of dollars worth of military aid. Peacemaking would have involved spending the past decades insisting on the adherence to international law, rather than issuing platitudes about a two-state solution, whilst tolerating actions expressly designed to destroy any such outcome. Peace building would have involved a long-term collaborative process to address the root causes of conflict rather than pandering to the short-term political and economic interests of Western governments. The deal which looks set to be struck is as arduous as it is precarious. It will cease hostilities, commit to the return of hostages held by Hamas while Israel frees Palestinian prisoners, withdraw Israeli forces from parts of Gaza, and allow further humanitarian aid into Palestine. During such time, negotiations will continue between the parties, brokered by both the Qataris and the Egyptians, on how all hostages will be released, followed by discussions on the rebuilding of Gaza. This was an agreement that, whilst it had been on the table for months, appears to have become more palatable for Netanyahu recently. The strengthening of Israel's position in the region with the fall of Assad, the weakening of Hezbollah, and the fading influence of Iran has made a deal more likely. Of course, looming behind the mediators is the towering orange glow of the 47th President of the United States. All sides were keen, in part, to get something on the table before Donald signed his paperwork and became Commander-in-Chief again. It's neither relevant, nor do I care much about which president will seek to claim glory in getting the side to this stage of negotiations. Neither will the people of Palestine. It would be premature, if utterly misleading, for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump to claim they have brought peace to the Middle East. If your land is occupied, any part of it, you do not live in peace. If you live with the threat that your home will be bulldozed to create another illegal Israeli settlement, you do not live in peace. If you are subject to detention without charge at any age, you do not live in peace. Even in these darkest of times, we have to believe that peace and justice are possible. We must also be realistic. A ceasefire is not the same as peace, any more than periods of lower-level conflict have equated to peace in the region in years past. Of course, we pray that this fragile ceasefire will hold and that the collective guilt of the international community will translate into the promised rebuilding of Gaza. If the UK government wants to start playing a meaningful role and atoning for their complicity in Gaza's destruction, the Prime Minister must pledge, without equivocation, the full strength of our state in supporting the people of Palestine and playing our role in rebuilding the region. This cannot be piecemeal. We must unleash a tidal wave of aid towards Gaza. Medicine, food, shelter, humanitarian assistance. Then we must cease arms sales to Israel and undertake a campaign of boycott and sanctions until it adheres to international and humanitarian law that it has flouted for generations. Thus far in the history of this conflict, it is civil society, not the politicians, who have been on the right side of history on this. Community organisations, religious groups and trade unions have long campaigned for peace and equality in Palestine, just like we did for those suffering apartheid in South Africa. Every single poll over the past 15 months suggests that the people of these isles agree with us. Despite the hopes of a horrible minority, Gaza will be rebuilt. The people of Palestine will endure. They will survive. They will rebuild. They will flourish. They will do so because of the strength of their nation and through the solidarity that we will provide them. Ros Foyer is General Secretary of the Scottish Trades Union Congress. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald Scotland, 15th of January 2025. From the STEM section of the business section. Currys vindicated as AI powers Christmas sales boost. Article by Christy Dorsey. Currys appear to have been justified in last year's battle to fend off a foreign takeover after upgrading its profit forecast following a Christmas sales boost powered by AI. The company's shares were trading more than 10% higher in an otherwise lacklustre session in London this afternoon after the electronics retailer said it intends to declare its first dividend payment to shareholders since its half-year results in December 2022. The retail park stalwart expects to achieve full-year pre-tax profits of £145 million to £155 million, up from a previous consensus of £140 million, following a 2% increase in like-for-like sales across the UK and Ireland during the 10 weeks to January the 4th. This was driven by particularly strong demand for mobile, gaming and premium computing products. Currys is benefiting in part from a technology replacement cycle as consumers seek out new AI-enabled computers. But that's not to take away from the self-help story highlighted by what company directors described as a disciplined trading performance. This is set to continue, with the company cautioning that it is entering a period of depressed hiring ahead of national insurance hikes taking effect in April. Less than a year ago, the retailer was fighting to maintain its independence after Florida-based Elliott Advisors, the owner of the Waterstones bookstores, pitched an offer of 62 pence per share valuing Currys at £700 million. This was then upped to 67 pence, or £757 million, before the US venture capital group eventually walked away in March. The story didn't quite end there though, with Chinese e-commerce firm JD.com saying it was in the very preliminary stages of evaluating a potential bid for Currys. The latter never materialised, but Currys chief executive Alex Baldock knows that the group must continue to deliver. This, however, could be the very thing that attracts further unwanted attention. Today's upgrade to its guidance, along with the potential reinstatement of the dividend later in the year, show how far Currys has come, said John Moore, Senior Investment Manager at RBC Brewin Dolphin. Given the company's trajectory and its relatively modest valuation, it wouldn't be surprising to see the previous interest in Currys reappear. And that article was written by Christy Dorsey. From Herald Scotland, 17th of January 2025, from the STEM section of the business section. Scotland's charity air ambulance launches state-of-the-art helicopter. Article by Craig Williams. Scotland's charity air ambulance, SCAA, is set to launch the UK's most advanced helicopter air ambulance of its type. The new Airbus H145-D3 is currently in production and will receive its customised aeromedical fit-out along with some modification before being ready for operational service with SCAA later this year. The state-of-the-art twin-engine 5-rotor aircraft will replace an existing EC-135 at the charity's Aberdeen base. SCAA Chief Executive David Craig said the new aircraft announcement forms part of the most significant operational investment by the charity in its 12-year history. The H145-D3 is an aircraft that will help fly SCAA into the next decade, he said. No one in Scotland should die because help can't get there in time, and this new helicopter will offer great range, endurance and capacity, which significantly enhances our life-saving service and our ability to meet the ever-growing demand on pre-hospital emergency response teams. When our new H145-D3 takes to the skies, it will be the most capable air ambulance of its kind in the UK, operating in the most challenging environment, added Mr. Craig. It will be a lifesaver. SCAA operates 2 helicopter emergency response air ambulances based at Perth since 2013 and Aberdeen since 2020. This decision to strategically focus on introducing new aircraft at our Aberdeen base was driven by reviewing our operational data across all of Scotland over the last 5 years, said Mr. Craig. Working closely with the Scottish Ambulance Service and their doctor-led Scotstar North EMRS, Emergency Medical Retrieval Service, this enhanced and more capable aircraft will ensure that, when critical care is required anywhere in Scotland, we can provide a team of specialist doctors and 2 SCAA paramedics to the scene of an emergency. This will deliver a robust, specialist and extensive multidisciplinary team to any incident. A new 10-year contract with aviation partner Babcock will also see crews at both Aberdeen and Perth equipped with night vision imaging systems, NVIS, technology to maximise its operational capability. Mr. Craig said that NVIS has recently been introduced at SCAA's Perth base, enabling the charity to respond more safely to emergencies. increasing its ability to reach more patients during Scotland's winters. SCAA is now able to deploy to non-surveyed locations anywhere in Scotland during darkness hours this winter, using the very latest technology to the benefit of both patients and crew, he said. This will ensure each duty shift is unimpeded by aviation restrictions when the sun sets or skies darken, and SCAA will be available to respond whenever and wherever required by those most seriously ill or injured. The operational enhancements will add an extra £2 million a year to SCAA's current £8 million costs, and today's announcement sparks a major nationwide Operation Skyward fundraising campaign to support the upgrades and fly SCAA into the future. Mr. Craig said, "Other than the initial launch of our service, this new contract represents the single most significant operational investment for the charity. Funded entirely by public donation without any government contribution, SCAA has responded to more than 6,500 call-outs since launching in 2013, with last year proving our busiest ever. In that time, the public has donated more than £65 million, hugely generous support that has allowed us to plan and evolve and grow to meet demand with a sustainable, enhanced service. In order to meet the constantly evolving and increasingly high standards of both air ambulance crew and equipment, donations will continue to be invested in delivering our charitable purpose, and our frontline operation is a priority as that ultimately saves lives." He added, "SCAA last upgraded its aircraft in 2015 after 2 years in service and launched our Aberdeen operation in 2020. The time is right to advance yet again to ensure SCAA remains at the forefront of patient care and service delivery. Our patients will benefit hugely from the upgrade, and our crews will appreciate the enhancements that a larger airframe with greater capacity and endurance brings to their life-saving work. But we can't do it alone, and our appeal goes to individuals, groups, organisations, businesses, trusts and foundations who share our ambition that no one in Scotland should die because help can't get there in time. The Scottish public have proved lifesavers through their amazing support of SCAA to date, and the many thousands of lives which will be saved and improved through our latest upgrades will be as a result of their continued generosity." And that article was written by Craig Williams.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 21st of January 2025, from the Voices section. Remote work isn't the culprit in declining UK productivity. This article is by Christy Dorsey. It's nearly 5 years on since the city streets fell into an eerie hush as COVID lockdown restrictions took effect, with all but essential stores closed and millions of office employees getting their first ever taste of working from home. Social distancing now seems a distant memory, but remote and hybrid working has become the norm for more than a third of the population, according to latest official figures. Stuart Rose, who has headed up some of the biggest companies in UK retail, reckons this is creating a generation of people who are not doing proper work. What exactly does that mean? For different people, there are different answers. Some might say that acting, music, or writing, including the scribblings of journalists, isn't proper work. There was a time when sitting behind a desk was deemed to fall foul of legitimate employment, with only physical labour worthy of the moniker. That is not, however, what Conservative peer Lord Rose appears to be suggesting. Rather, the former boss of Marks and Spencer and Asda seems concerned that feckless employees are neglecting their duties when out from under the watchful eyes of management. We have regressed in this country in terms of working practices, productivity, and in terms of the country's well-being. I think by 20 years in the last 4, he told BBC One's Panorama. People who drive trains have to go to work. People who work in operating theatres have to go to work. People who work in services industries like retail have to go to work, and others don't. They have children, they have problems, they have issues, they just deal with them. If productivity is the issue, working from home is far from the top of the list of culprits. If it was, then why does the UK's laggard performance on productivity growth predate the onset of the pandemic by more than a decade? The answer isn't simple, but there are 2 primary reasons cited time and again by economists: protracted underinvestment and chronic short-termism. Labour productivity is commonly measured as the value of goods and services produced per hour by a country's workforce. Growth is fueled by investment in skills, machinery, technology to boost the value of those goods and services, and such investment has been sorely lacking in the UK. To be clear, low productivity growth is not unique to the UK. Labour productivity has been plummeting in most advanced economies since the late 1990s. But the UK has performed particularly badly relative to comparable economies, sitting in the bottom half of OECD rankings and well below France, Germany, and the United States. Severe austerity measures from 2010, introduced by the Conservatives in response to the financial crisis, greatly weakened public investment, while private investment has been deterred by Brexit. This is reflected in annual productivity growth that averaged around 2% in the years prior to the banking crisis, but now stands at roughly 0.5%. But possibly the biggest barrier to private investment has been policy churn. The UK is not short on plans and strategies to boost productivity, but these have achieved little thanks to constant chopping and changing of priorities. This has been exacerbated by frequent shifts in UK government policy, with no less than 11 growth strategies, 9 business secretaries, and 7 chancellors between 2011 and 2023. This level of uncertainty does not help when asking industry leaders to invest large sums of money in a 10 or 20-year horizon. With all this in mind, it is naive to suggest that the UK's productivity problems can be fixed by ordering staff back to the office, where work rates will magically overcome much larger structural obstacles. That doesn't mean that some aren't trying. Amazon and JP Morgan, the latter of which has a sizable corporate presence in Glasgow, are just some of the businesses that now require head office staff to be in every day. Others, such as Barclays and PwC, also represented in Glasgow's financial district, have tightened up their rules on home working. Some believe the push to return to the office will gather pace in 2025 as the job market slows in response to tax measures announced in the autumn budget, giving employers who wish to move in this direction the upper hand. There is a strong argument to this, but even so, evidence suggests it will not go unopposed. Earlier this month, public relations group WPP sent an all-staff memo ordering employees back into the office for 4 days a week. A petition calling on the policy to be revoked garnered nearly 20,000 signatures, with the FTSE 100 giant reportedly facing a mutiny among its 110,000 staff. The issue has also become politicised, with the Labour government currently legislating to strengthen the right of employees across the UK to request working from home. Under the last government, some Conservative ministers expressed their opposition to remote working. Lord Rose has served as a Conservative peer in the House of Lords since 2014, and in 2022 was quoted as saying that he is an unreconstructed get-back-to-work man. A short biography of him on Asda's website said, "Stuart appears to have no hobbies apart from work and has a dog called Bruce." Prior to the pandemic, less than 5% of people employed in the UK worked from home. According to a snapshot survey by the Office for National Statistics in December 26% of people split their working time between home and the office during the previous 7 days, while a further 13% were fully remote. There is no quick fix for poor productivity, but the problem is not one of widespread laziness across the workforce. The evidence on the economic and financial benefits of remote working is mixed, and the truth is there is no single correct solution to this minor component in the productivity puzzle. That article was by Christy Dorsey.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.